Let's go a little broader now, and I want to try out an idea on you to get your reaction. I'm trying to make sense of the current foreign policy in the early days of the Trump administration. And I think under President Trump, if you believe in that theory of we help those who help themselves, Taiwan is not really helping itself against a major threat. Ukraine, similarly, now it's fighting a bitter war, but for some reason, 18 to 25-year-olds are not conscripted into the Ukrainian armed forces. Now, if you're being invaded, why is that?
The case of Ukraine, I think, is a little bit different
Yeah.
because of the nature of the war there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the early recognition by the Ukrainians that if they were going to defend themselves in the short to medium term, they needed to be careful that they weren't sacrificing an entire generation, especially a younger generation. The understanding was that this war was not going to be a short one, and that at one point it was going to become a grinding war, similar to World War I. And so the question was, okay, how do you preserve your society while you fight this war? And I think the Ukrainians are reaching a point now where they're going to have to make bigger decisions. The Trump administration has articulated most recently that they're understanding American security commitments differently.
Yeah.
And that they're viewing the world differently. And that this is going to be very upsetting, if not distressing, for many of our traditional partners.
I don't see the Europeans responding to this with a serious military response yet.
Well, actually the Europeans began thinking this through during the first Trump administration.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
In fact, it was in the aftermath of Chancellor Merkel's visit to Washington and her conversations with President Trump in the early part of his first term.
Were you in the room?
I was in the room. In fact, she said that it was time for the Europeans to thank the Americans for being clear about what the future looked like, and that it was time for the Europeans to take much greater responsibility for their security. But Macron is at it again, holding meetings in Paris with both European Union and non-European Union members in order to think through what's happening and try to develop a coherent and consistent response to the United States. Well, if you look at European history, it's all been about how you manage Russia.
Right.
It's all been about how you keep Russia in a larger kind of condominium. These are diplomatic traditions and tendencies that are hard to jettison.
Right.
And the German approach for the longest time was to involve Russia in the economy of Western Europe.
Right. Yep.
And the United States had a similar approach in terms of promoting U.S. investment in Russia, and some of it very high-end investment. But all this breaks down with the decision by President Putin to launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And so in many ways, we're still trying to unentangle ourselves from a very long history of trying to manage Russia from the outside.